Guys, so in this one we're going to talk about one of the most important things that you need to be able to do as a bartender, and that's how to check a proper form of identification. So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect your establishment's liquor license. An establishment opens up, they get a liquor license that allows them to serve alcohol to their customers. And these things are very hard to come by and they're very expensive. And basically the agency, Alcohol Beverage Control, or whatever the state that you live in might be called, they issue and then enforce these licenses. And if you get busted serving underage kids too many times, then they'll take your license and you're basically out of business. So the first thing that we're gonna do if somebody comes up to the bar and they look a little bit young is just to ask them if they're 21. The agency that issues these, they will come in with decoys and try to bust you, but one of the things that they can't do is they can't lie to you. So if you ask one of their decoys if they're 21, they can't lie to you about that. Generally, make sure you check your state specific guidelines because there is some variance in that. So the first thing to do is just ask them if they're 21. Next thing, to have a legal form of ID. Generally you're talking about a driver's license here, or it could be an identification card from the state. So there's a couple criteria that we need to have. First thing is it needs to be issued from an official licensing body like the state. Next thing is it needs to have a birthday. It needs to have an expiration date, and it needs to have physical description, height and weight, eye color, and so forth. So if you're not familiar with your state's ID, I'd say just have an intimate evening at home and get to know your ID. Feel where there's ridges, hold it up to lights, and see where different patterns might form when you shine a light behind it. Try to find a black light, look at it under a black light, and just make sure that you're a bit of an expert on the state license that you're gonna be working in, because this is gonna be 99% of the IDs that you're gonna check are gonna be a driver's license. Now there are some weird instances where some forms of ID are not acceptable, and one of those forms of ID that can be sometimes not acceptable is a passport, which sounds really weird because this comes from our government and this should be like the most legit form of ID that you can find. But the problem with the passport, if you look at it, is there's no physical description, right? It's got your name, your birthday, issued from the United States of America, but there's no physical description. It doesn't have height, weight, or eye color on here. So there are some bars, and this is usually the case if places have been popped a few times and they're kind of on their last strike and they're trying to be real careful about not losing their license. They might not take a form of ID that doesn't have a physical description on it. Now this can also include military IDs. Now San Diego is a military town, so we have a lot of military people. Thank you for your service, love you very much. But sometimes there are places, like I said, that they won't always accept military IDs. So assuming we have a proper ID, how do you check an ID? First thing you want to look for is an expiration date. Don't start at the picture, don't start doing math in your head, just look at the expiration date. Because if the ID is expired, then stop. You don't need to go any further. They need to have a non-expired license for it to be a legal form of identification. So not expired, next thing you want to go to is the birthday. Now with the birthday, you need to look at the year first. You're gonna have to do a little bit of math, and then you also need to check for the day and the month, because people will come in the year where somebody is 20 and then they're turning 21. It'll still have that proper 21-year-old age year on it. Does that make sense? So let's say this month is June, and I don't turn 21 until August, but bartenders will be used to just looking at the years. So if they're just paying attention to the year, they look at my ID, even though in a few months when I turn 21 in August, right now it doesn't count. So pay attention when they're real close, right on the cusp, and of the year, born in the year that they're 21. So if it's not expired, the birthday says they're 21, then the third thing you want to go to is the picture. So don't start at the picture, because pictures can be weird. I'm sure you've had IDs in the past that might not have been your favorite pictures, or maybe you love your picture, but they can change. People can change their hair, people can lose and gain weight, and it can be a drastic difference. So you're basically looking at a few things. One, you're looking at the shape of their eyes, the shape of their nose, the shape of their mouth, and where their ears line up in correspondence to their eyes. So basically, the reason that you're looking at those distinguishing factors is that it doesn't matter if somebody changes their hairstyle or if they lose or gain weight. Those parameters generally don't tend to change. So if we have an ID that's not expired, it says they're 21, and it looks like them, and you asked them if they're 21, they said yes, and that all checks out, then you're probably fine. Now, in the process of spotting fake IDs, there's some establishments that are real gung-ho about this, and they'll incentivize you that if you can get a fake ID, then they might pay you for it. Or brownie points or whatever. Maybe you work at a club and you have bouncers, so you might not even have to worry about it. Usually when somebody comes in and they're underage and they have a fake ID, you can see it in their face, right? Their poker tails come out. And if you come in and you're underage and you're using a fake ID, maybe you've done in the past, it can be pretty nerve-wracking because you can get in a lot of trouble for using a fake ID. So if somebody's acting a little bit weird, and you'll kind of get your spider senses will start tingling that they're just something's a little bit off, and make sure you pay attention to those people, especially if they look on the young side. A scenario that you need to be careful is if you're working in an establishment establishment and maybe it's a restaurant and there's a waiting area, or maybe it's kind of just an open floor type bar situation where there may be people that are of age with people that are not of age. And if somebody comes up and they try to order multiple drinks, let's say a guy comes up and he orders like 5 beers, you need to have an ID, and preferably a person with that ID for every beer, or if it's like a pitcher, right? That's another common one. They get a pitcher of beers or a pitcher of margaritas or sangria or whatever, and they'll ask for 4 or 5 glasses. So you need to have an ID for every single one of those glasses. Another common misconception is that bouncers can save you. So let's say you're working at a club and there's bouncers at the front door and they're checking everybody's IDs that come in. Let's say somebody slips in through the front door and they're underage and you serve them and they get all wasted. The kid's parents come back with the police and they want to press charges because they served their kid who was underage. Who's going to be in trouble? The bouncer or you? Well, probably both. But ultimately, just because the bouncer was checking IDs at the door doesn't mean that we're off the hook. We're responsible for everybody that we serve. So if you serve somebody underage, even if there's a bouncer at the front door, we're gonna be in trouble for that. The last thing I'll say is that as long as you're doing your best, trying not to serve somebody underage, and trying to genuinely just do your job like we're supposed to, then you're probably gonna be all right here. So get to know your state's ID, look over your state's regulations and policies. Another thing you can do is that agency will generally offer a training of some sort. There's tips trainings. Even if they're not required by the state law or by your employer, it's probably a good idea to get those done just so you're familiar with the policies of checking IDs and what your state specific guidelines are. And it can help you get a job because the owners or managers aren't worried about you doing something stupid. So it looks good on your resume. Okay, that's basically it for checking IDs.